Captain Zeftal adjusted the controls on his viewing screen as another cluster of crystal formations came into view. The asteroid field stretched endlessly before them, each rock glowing with the soft blue light that made these spores so valuable to his people. He had been leading botanical expeditions for over 20 cycles, but the sight still filled him with wonder. "Captain, we have located another rich deposit on asteroid 77 Alpha," announced Science Officer Lithara from her station near the back of the bridge. Her forearms moved gracefully across the sensor controls as she fine-tuned the readings. "The crystalline formations appear to be at peak maturity." Zeftal nodded, his large eyes reflecting the blue glow from the main screen. The Valari had traveled far from their home world to find these rare spores. Back on Valith Prime, the crystals would be used to enhance their agricultural systems, helping to grow food that could feed thousands. This expedition alone could provide enough material to last several seasons. "Excellent work, Lithara. Signal the harvesting team to prepare for extraction." He turned to his communications officer. "Trellin, send word to the other survey ships in our fleet. Let them know we have found what we came for." The bridge hummed with quiet activity as the crew went about their duties. 12 Valari worked. At various stations, their movements calm and precise. Violence was unknown on their world. The most dangerous creature on Valith Prime was a small animal that ate garden plants. Their ships carried no weapons beyond simple mining tools. Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarms began to sound. Trellin looked up from his station with concern. "Captain, I am detecting 3 large vessels approaching our position. They are not responding to our greeting signals." Zeftal felt a chill run through his body. Unknown ships in deep space rarely brought good news. "Can you identify their origin?" "Negative, sir. The ship designs are not in our database. They appear to be heavily armed." Trellin's voice carried a note of fear that made the other crew members look up from their work. The main screen flickered and changed to show 3 dark vessels moving toward them with obvious hostile intent. Each ship was twice the size of the Valari research vessel, covered in weapon mounts and scarred armor plating. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. "This is Captain Zeftal of the Valari research vessel Serenity's Edge," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We are peaceful scientists conducting botanical research. We mean no harm to anyone." The response came immediately, transmitted in harsh tones that hurt the sensitive Valari ears. The translation system worked frantically to decode the alien language. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed. This sector belongs to the Krovan Syndicate. Your vessel and crew are now our property." Lithara gasped from her station. "Captain, those are Krovan raiders. I have heard stories about them from other exploration teams. They capture peaceful species and sell them as slaves." Zeftal's mind raced. The Krovan were legendary in this part of the galaxy, though few Valari had ever encountered them directly. They were known to attack research vessels, cargo ships, and even small colonies. Those who survived their raids spoke of brutal treatment and lives spent in chains. "Trellin, try to contact our escort ships," Zeftal ordered, though he knew it was hopeless. The Valari survey fleet had split up days ago to cover more territory. Their nearest companion vessel was light years away. "I cannot reach them, Captain. The Krovan ships are jamming our communications." The first energy blasts struck their hull, sending vibrations through the entire ship. The Valari vessel had been built for research, not combat. Its thin hull plating began to buckle under the assault. Emergency lights flashed as systems failed throughout the ship. "Engineering reports major damage to our power systems," called out another crew member. "We are losing life support on decks 3 and 4. Zeftal knew they had only minutes before the Krovan would board their ship. He had heard the stories of what happened to species who fell into Krovan hands. The raiders kept some as slaves, for dangerous work. Others were sold to fighting rings for entertainment. The lucky ones died quickly. "Lithara, can you get a distress signal out before they capture us?" She worked frantically at her controls as the ship shook from another barrage. "I am trying, Captain, but their jamming is very strong. I might be able to punch through on a narrow beam using our main communication array." "Do it. Send our location and a plea for help to anyone who might receive it." Lithara's 4 hands moved with desperate speed. She encoded their position using universal mathematical principles that any spacefaring species should understand. The message was simple but clear. Peaceful aliens under attack, coordinates included, help requested from anyone willing to assist. Message sent, Captain. I managed to get it out on multiple frequencies before they blocked our transmitters again. The ship shuddered as something large attached to their hull. Through the security monitors, they could see armored figures cutting through their outer airlock. The Krovan boarding party had arrived. Zeftal looked around at his crew. Fear filled their large eyes, but also resignation. The Valari were not fighters. Their species had evolved on a world where cooperation and peaceful problem-solving had always been the way to survive. Everyone remained calm, he said softly. Do not resist them. Perhaps if we cooperate, they will treat us with some measure of mercy. The sound of cutting tools grew louder as the Krovan worked their way through the ship's defenses. Lithara closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the ancient spirits of Valith Prime. She hoped that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone had received their desperate call for help. But she held little hope that anyone would come. The galaxy was full of peaceful species who avoided the Krovan rather than face their wrath. Who would be foolish enough to challenge raiders who had terrorized this sector for generations? The airlock exploded inward, and dark figures in battle, armor poured onto the bridge. The Krovan had come to claim their prize. Communications officer Lisa Morgan rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of coffee. The night shift at Luna Station was usually quiet, with only routine traffic between Earth and the outer colonies. She monitored dozens of frequencies, listening for distress calls from cargo ships or mining operations in the asteroid belt. At 0347 hours, something unusual caught her attention. A weak signal was coming through on the Deep Space Monitoring Array, far beyond the normal range of human operations. The transmission was fragmented and used completely unknown language patterns. Lisa leaned forward in her chair and adjusted the signal filters. The message repeated every few minutes, growing weaker each time. She had been trained to recognize standard human distress codes, but this was something entirely different. Computer, analyze signal pattern and attempt language identification. She spoke to her workstation. Unknown language detected. Signal contains mathematical sequences consistent with universal communication protocols. Estimated origin, 47 light-years from current position. Lisa felt her heart rate increase. 47 light-years was far beyond human exploration range. If this was a real alien signal, it would be the first contact humanity had ever made with another intelligent species. She immediately activated the emergency communication system. Commander Phillips to communications immediately. Priority Alpha. Within minutes, Commander Jake Phillips arrived in the communications center, still pulling on his uniform jacket. At 45 years old, he had spent 20 years in the space service and had never seen anything like this. "What do you have, Morgan?" he asked, settling into the chair next to her workstation. "Sir, I picked up what appears to be an alien distress signal about an hour ago. The computer confirms it contains universal mathematical patterns, but the language is completely unknown." Phillips studied the readouts on her screen. The signal was definitely artificial, not some natural phenomenon. The mathematical sequences were too precise and repetitive to be anything but intelligent communication. "Have you been able to decode any of it?" "No, sir, but the computer has identified several numerical patterns that might represent coordinates. If I'm reading this correctly, someone is broadcasting their location and asking for help." Phillips made his decision quickly. "Send a copy of everything to Earth Command immediately. Flag it as potential first contact scenario. Then get our best linguist team working on translation." "Yes, sir. Should I continue monitoring the signal?" "Absolutely. I want you to track any changes in strength or content. This could be the most important transmission in human history." The encrypted data package reached Earth Command within minutes. Admiral Patricia Hayes was woken at her home in Colorado Springs to review the transmission. She had overseen humanity's expansion into space for the past decade, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. By 0600 hours, a crisis team had assembled at Earth Command headquarters. Scientists, linguists, and military strategists crowded into the main briefing room as the alien signal played through the speakers. Dr. Amy Watson, Earth's leading expert in theoretical xenolinguistics, worked frantically at her computer terminal. She had spent years developing protocols for potential alien contact, but the reality was more challenging than any simulation. "The mathematical portions are definitely coordinate references," she announced to the room. "They're using base 8, numbering, which suggests the senders have 8 digits or appendages. The coordinates place them in an unexplored sector beyond our current mapping range." Admiral Hayes leaned over Dr. Watson's shoulder. "Can you determine what they're asking for?" "The repetition patterns suggest urgency. There are several sequences that might represent distress markers. Based on the mathematical relationships, I believe they're requesting assistance." "How confident are you that this is genuine?" Dr. Watson looked up from her screen. "Admiral, this signal is too complex to be a hoax and too structured to be natural. We're looking at communication from an intelligent alien species." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and someone was asking for help. Admiral Hayes turned to Captain Alex Rodriguez, who commanded the UES Titan, Earth's most advanced deep space vessel. "Captain, how quickly can you reach those coordinates?" Rodriguez consulted his navigation computer. "With our experimental FTL drive, approximately 3 days. But Admiral, we don't know what we're flying into. This could be a trap or a situation beyond our capabilities." "Dr. Watson, continue working on translation. I want to know as much as possible about who sent this message and what kind of help they need." Over the next 6 hours, Dr. Watson made breakthrough after breakthrough. The alien language used logical patterns that became clearer with each decoded section. What she discovered made her blood run cold. "Admiral, I've translated enough to understand the basic situation," she reported to the emergency session. "The aliens call themselves Valari. They're scientists conducting research when they were attacked by another species called the Krovan." "What kind of attack?" The message describes capture and enslavement. The Krovan appear to be raiders who have been operating in that sector for a long time. According to the transmission, they systematically capture peaceful species for slave labor. Admiral Hayes studied the star chart showing the signal's origin. "What do we know about the Valari themselves?" "They seem to be a peaceful, scientific species. No mention of weapons or military capability. The message suggests they expected no one to respond because most civilized species avoid confronting the Krovan." Captain Rodriguez spoke up from across the room. "Admiral, if this is accurate, we might be looking at a genocide in progress. These Valari could all be dead by the time we arrive." "Or worse," Dr. Watson added grimly. "The translation suggests the Krovan keep slaves for dangerous work and entertainment. Death might be preferable to what they're facing." Admiral Hayes made her decision. "Captain Rodriguez, prepare the Titan for immediate departure. Full crew, complement and maximum armament. Dr. Watson, you're going with them. Continue translation work during the journey." "Admiral, are we certain we want to involve ourselves in an alien conflict?" asked General Morrison from the Joint Chiefs. "We know nothing about the military capabilities of either species. General, Earth has always stood against slavery and oppression. That principle doesn't change just because we're dealing with aliens. If peaceful scientists are being attacked by slavers, we have a moral obligation to help." 3 hours later, the UES Titan departed Earth orbit with 200 crew members aboard. As they entered FTL Drive, Dr. Watson continued decoding the Valari message in her laboratory. The more she learned, the more concerned she became. The Krovan had apparently been raiding this sector for generations, building an empire on slave labor and fear. No species had ever successfully challenged them, but the Krovan had never encountered humans before. The UES Titan dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the asteroid field. Captain Alex Rodriguez stood on the bridge, studying the tactical display as his sensors painted a grim picture of what they had found. "Sir, we have 2 vessels in the area," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. "One appears to match the configuration described in the Valari transmission. The other is much larger and is attached to it. Rodriguez walked to the main viewing screen. As the image sharpened, the Volari research ship looked like a broken toy next to the massive dark vessel that had clamped onto its hull. Pieces of debris floated around both ships, glinting in the light of the distant star. The larger ship is definitely not Volari design, Kim continued. Heavy armor plating, multiple weapon systems, and what looks like cargo holds designed for transporting prisoners. Dr. Amy Watson joined the captain at the main screen. During their 3-day journey, she had decoded enough of the Volari language to hold basic conversations. Captain, that has to be a Krovan slaver ship. Look at those modifications to the hull. Those are holding cells. Rodriguez felt anger building in his chest. Slavery was one of humanity's darkest chapters, something they had fought wars to end. Seeing it happening to aliens who had asked for help made his blood boil. Communications, broadcast on all frequencies. Use the Volari language patterns, Dr. Watson provided. Ensign Mike Turner worked at his station. Channel open, sir. This is Captain Alex Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Titan. We received your distress call and have come to provide assistance. Krovan vessel, release your prisoners immediately and withdraw from this area. The response came quickly, but not from the aliens they had hoped to rescue. The main screen flickered as an incoming transmission took over the display. A creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and a shark stared at them with cold, predatory eyes. I am Commander Grixhar of the Krovan warship Bone Render, the alien snarled in heavily accented but understandable English. You will surrender your vessel immediately or be destroyed. Your species is unknown to us, but you will make excellent slaves. Dr. Watson stepped forward. Captain, how does he know our language? Translation software, Rodriguez replied grimly. The same kind we're using, which means they've encountered other species before. Grixhar continued his message. We have been expanding our territory for over 300 cycles. 47 species now serve the Krovan Syndicate. You will become the 48th, or you will die. The transmission changed to show the interior of the Krovan ship. Human stomachs turned as they saw rows of cells filled with different alien species. Some looked similar to the Volari. Others were completely different. All showed signs of mistreatment and despair. These are the consequences of resistance, Grixhar announced as Krovan guards struck prisoners with energy weapons. Submit now, and your deaths will be quick. Fight us, and you will spend your remaining years in chains. The transmission ended, leaving the human bridge in stunned silence. Rodriguez had seen combat in the colonial wars, but nothing had prepared him for the casual cruelty displayed by the Krovan commander. Sir, they're powering up weapons, Kim reported from her station. Multiple energy cannon and what appears to be some kind of plasma torpedo system. Rodriguez looked around his bridge. 200 humans had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return home. They had come to help strangers based on nothing more than a desperate message in the dark. Dr. Watson, how many Volari were on that research ship? According to the transmission, 12 crew members were conducting the botanical survey. And how many prisoners did we see in those cells? Watson's voice was quiet. At least 100, possibly more. Different species, but all showing signs of long-term captivity. Rodriguez made his decision. The Krovan had chosen to respond to an offer of peaceful contact with threats and displays of cruelty. They had revealed themselves to be exactly what the Volari message had described. Slavers who built their empire on the suffering of others. All hands, this is the captain. We came here to help peaceful aliens who asked for our assistance. Instead, we've found evidence of systematic slavery and oppression spanning multiple species and generations. The Krovan have 30 seconds to release all prisoners and withdraw from this system. Sir, his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, spoke up. Their ship is twice our size and appears heavily armed. Are you sure about this? Rodriguez thought about the images they had seen. Dozens of alien species locked in cells, beaten down by years of captivity. He thought about the Volari scientist who had sent out a desperate plea for help, never expecting anyone to answer. Lieutenant Commander Torres, The Krovan have spent 300 years terrorizing peaceful species because no one was willing to stand up to them. Today that changes. The Krovan response was immediate. Energy beams lanced out from the bone render, striking the Titan's forward shields. The human ship shuddered under the impact but held together. Shields at 85%, Torres reported. Their weapons are powerful but not beyond our defensive capabilities. Return fire, target their weapon systems. The Titan's response was swift and precise. Human weapons technology had been developed through centuries of warfare on Earth. Every system had been tested in combat, refined through bitter experience, and designed with one purpose: to win fights. The Krovan had conquered peaceful species who built ships for exploration and research. They had never faced a military vessel designed by a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting for survival. Grixhar watched in shock as his weapon systems exploded under the human barrage. Impossible. No species has ever matched Krovan firepower. On the Titan's bridge, Torres smiled grimly. Sir, their armor is impressive, but their internal systems appear vulnerable. They've prioritized intimidation over actual combat effectiveness. Continue firing. Target their engines and life support systems. I want that ship crippled, not destroyed. We need those prisoners alive. The battle that followed was less of a fight than a demonstration. The Krovan had grown comfortable bullying species that couldn't fight back. Against humans who had been born on a world where everything tried to kill them, their advantages disappeared quickly. Sir, they're requesting to negotiate, Turner reported, from communications. Tell Commander Grixhar that the time for negotiation ended when he showed us those prison cells. He has 2 minutes to release all prisoners before we board his ship. The 2 minutes expired without any response from the Krovan ship. Captain Rodriguez watched as his tactical display showed the enemy vessel's weapon systems coming back online. Commander Grixhar had decided to continue the fight rather than surrender his prisoners. Sir, boarding shuttles are launching from their ship, reported Lieutenant Kim from sensors. It appears they're attempting to board us. Rodriguez almost smiled. The Krovan were trying the same tactics they used against peaceful research vessels. They had no idea what they were about to face. Lieutenant Commander Torres, destroy those shuttles. Prepare our own boarding parties. The Titan's point defense systems opened fire, turning the Krovan shuttles into expanding clouds of debris. At the same time, human assault shuttles launched from the Titan's hangar bays, their armored hulls reflecting the weapon fire that erupted from the enemy ship. Boarding. Teams away, Torres announced. Lieutenant Commander Nick Foster is leading Alpha Team directly to their prisoner holds. Sergeant Ben Carter's demolition team is targeting their engine room. In the lead assault shuttle, Foster checked his weapon one final time and looked at the 20 Marines under his command. Each human had been trained for combat in environments that would kill most alien species. They had practiced boarding actions in zero gravity, toxic atmospheres, and extreme temperatures. Listen up, Foster addressed his team through the comm system. Intelligence suggests these Krovan have been picking on peaceful species for centuries. They've never faced real soldiers. Show them what happens when they mess with the wrong people. 3. Shuttle's hull rang like a bell as Krovan weapons struck it, but the human armor held. Foster's pilot, Corporal Lisa Grant, flew through the defensive fire with skill born from years of combat training. She had learned to fly in Earth's atmosphere, where a single mistake meant death. 30 seconds to contact, Grant announced, as she lined up with the Krovan ship's hull. Foster's Marines activated their cutting torches as the shuttle clamped onto the enemy vessel. Within moments, they had burned through the Krovan armor plating and were pouring into the ship's corridors. The first Krovan defenders they encountered were wearing heavy battle armor and carrying weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. They fired at the humans with confidence born from 3 centuries of easy victories. Their shots bounced harmlessly off human combat suits designed to operate in the vacuum of space and the crushing depths of Earth's oceans. The Krovan weapons, effective against peaceful aliens, barely scratched equipment built for survival on a death world. Foster's return fire cut through Krovan armor like paper. His team advanced down the corridor at a pace that stunned the defenders. Where other species might advance cautiously, humans moved with the aggressive confidence of apex predators. Meanwhile, on another part of the ship, Chief Petty Officer. Maria Santos was having her own encounter with Krovan military doctrine. She had been separated from her team when a blast door closed between them, leaving her alone against a squad of enemy soldiers. The Krovan troops advanced on her position, expecting an easy victory against a single opponent. Santos had grown up in the slums of Detroit, where survival meant fighting multiple opponents on a daily basis. She used the ship's corridors like the urban environment she knew so well. The first Krovan soldier rounded the corner expecting to find a cowering alien. Instead, he found Santos waiting with a combat knife in one hand and a pistol in the other. The blade went between his armor plates before he could react, while her sidearm took out his backup. Santos moved through the ship like a force of nature, using tactics that no civilized species would consider. She set traps using the ship's own systems, turned the Krovans' technology against them, and fought with a ferocity that left enemy survivors shaking in terror. Sergeant Carter's demolition team had their own mission deep in the ship's engineering section. Carter was a demolitions expert who had learned his trade clearing minefields on Mars, where a single mistake would leave nothing but a crater. "Boss, these Krovan power systems are built like museum's pieces," reported Corporal Danny Walsh as he studied the enemy ship's reactor design. "No redundant safety systems, no combat hardening. It's like they never expected anyone to fight back." Carter nodded as he placed shaped charges on critical support structures. "Makes sense. When you've spent 300 years beating up scientists and farmers, you don't worry about real soldiers showing up." The explosions that followed shut down the Krovan ship's main engines and left their weapon systems operating on emergency power only. What had been a fearsome warship was now a crippled hulk drifting in space. On the Titan's bridge, Captain Rodriguez watched as his boarding teams reported success after success. The Krovan defenders were surrendering in growing numbers as word spread through their ship about the humans' fighting capabilities. "Sir, Commander Foster reports that they've reached the prisoner holds," Communications Officer Turner announced. "He's found the Volari survivors and approximately 130 prisoners from at least 15 different species." Dr. Watson stepped forward. "Captain, I'm reading massive trauma signs from the prisoners. They're going to need immediate medical attention. Deploy medical teams immediately, and get me a direct line to Commander Grixar." The Krovan commander's face appeared on the main screen, but he looked very different from the arrogant predator who had threatened them earlier. His bridge was damaged, half his crew was dead or wounded, and human soldiers were advancing toward his position. "What are you?" Grixar demanded, his voice filled with fear and confusion. "No species fights like this. Your people advance into weapon fire like it means nothing. Your soldiers shrug off injuries that would kill most beings. What kind of world created monsters like you?" Rodriguez studied the alien's terrified expression. "Commander, we come from a planet where everything tries to kill us from the moment we're born. Our gravity is 3 times what most species consider normal. Our atmosphere is poisoned to half the galaxy. Our weather systems regularly produce storms that could destroy cities." He paused, letting the information sink in. "We didn't choose to be born on a death world, but we used what it taught us. And what it taught us is that bullies like you only understand one language." Grixar's bridge shook as human marines breached his final defensive positions. "Surrender now," Rodriguez continued, "and you'll be treated according to civilized standards. Continue fighting, and you'll discover why peaceful species across the galaxy are going to sleep easier, knowing that Earth has joined the conversation." The Krovan commander looked at his ruined ship and his defeated crew. 300 years of easy conquest had ended in less than an hour against a species that fought like demons and never gave ground. "I surrender," he whispered, and the age of Krovan dominance came to an end. Captain Zephital slowly opened his eyes as gentle hands helped him sit up on the medical table. The lighting was soft and warm, nothing like the harsh glare of the Krovan prison cells. For a moment he thought he might be dreaming. "Please remain still," said a voice in perfectly translated Volari. "You have been injured and need to recover slowly." Zephital looked around to see a human female in a white medical coat checking readings on a device he did not recognize. Dr. Amy Watson smiled at him, but he could see something in her eyes that made him nervous. "Where am I?" he asked weakly. "You are aboard the human vessel Titan. We received your distress signal and came to help. You are safe now. The memories came flooding back. The Krovan attack, the desperate message, the brutal guards who had beaten anyone who spoke without permission. Zeftal tried to stand, but his legs would not support him. My crew, what happened to my crew? All 11 survivors are being treated in our medical bay. Your injuries were the most serious, but everyone will recover. Zeftal felt relief wash over him, followed immediately by confusion. Survivors? But there were 12 of us. Dr. Watson's expression grew sad. I am sorry. Science Officer Lithara was killed during the Krovan boarding action. She died trying to protect the others. The Valari captain closed his large eyes and grieved for his lost friend. Lithara had been young, brilliant, and full of hope for the future. She had spent her short life studying ways to help their people grow better food. How did you defeat the Krovan? He asked after several minutes. They had weapons that conquered entire worlds. Their ship was massive. Dr. Watson sat down beside his medical table. Captain, I need to explain something about my species that might be difficult to understand. Humans come from what the galaxy classifies as a death world. I do not know this term. A death world is a planet so dangerous that most species consider it uninhabitable. Our gravity is 3 times stronger than your homeworld. Our weather systems produce storms that could destroy cities. Our oceans are filled with predators larger than your largest buildings. Zeftal stared at her in horror. How do you survive in such a place? We evolved there. Everything on Earth tries to kill us, so we became very good at killing back. We learned to fight, to adapt, and to never give up no matter how bad things become. The medical bay doors opened and Captain Rodriguez entered with several of his officers. Zeftal felt his heart rate increase as the humans approached. They moved with the fluid grace of predators, and their eyes constantly scanned for threats. Captain Zeftal, Rodriguez said in careful Valari, I am glad to see you are recovering. We need to ask you some questions about the Krovan and their operations. Of course, I will tell you anything you need to know. Dr. Watson activated a translation device as Rodriguez began his questions. How long have the Krovan been operating in this sector? The raid started before I was born, perhaps 200 cycles ago. They began with small attacks on isolated research stations and cargo ships. Why didn't anyone stop them? Zeftal looked confused by the question. Stop them? Captain, the Krovan have military technology beyond anything most species possess. They have conquered 47 different worlds. Who would be powerful enough to challenge them? Rodriguez exchanged glances with his officers. Captain, how many ships does your species have that could fight back against raiders? Fight back? Zeftal's large eyes grew even wider. We have no military vessels. The Valari are scientists and farmers. We build ships for research and exploration, not for war. What about other species in the area? Do any of them have military capabilities? A few species have defense forces for their homeworlds, but nothing that could challenge the Krovan in open space. Most civilized species abandoned military development centuries ago. We focus on science, art, and philosophy. Dr. Watson leaned forward. Captain, what do you know about the galactic community? How many species are there? The last survey counted over 300 intelligent species across this region of the galaxy. Most belong to what we call the Civilized Worlds Council. We share scientific discoveries and cultural exchanges. And none of these 300 species have real military forces? Zeftal shook his head. Why would they? Violence is something primitive species engage in before they develop philosophy and rational thought. The galaxy has been peaceful for thousands of cycles. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. Peaceful except for the Krovan. Yes. They are an aberration, a throwback to more primitive times. Most species simply avoid the sectors where they operate. How many species have they enslaved? We estimate they control at least 50 different worlds. Some species have been under Krovan rule for over a century. They use slave labor to mine dangerous materials and fight in their entertainment arenas. The humans remained silent as they absorbed this information. 300 peaceful species, with no real military capability, being terrorized by a single aggressive race. It was a nightmare scenario that explained why the Krovan had grown so powerful. Captain, Dr. Watson said gently, I need to ask you something that might sound strange. What do you know about human civilization? Nothing. We had never encountered your species before today. Are you part of the Civilized Worlds Council? No. Humans have never had contact with galactic civilization. We developed independently on our death world. Zeftal struggled to process this information. But your technology, your weapons, your military tactics, you must have learned from other species. We developed everything ourselves through thousands of years of constant warfare. Humans have been fighting each other and our environment since we first became intelligent. The Valari captain felt dizzy as the implications hit him. How many humans are there? Over 8 billion on our homeworld, plus several million in our colonies. 8 billion warriors? Rodriguez shook his head. Captain, we are not all warriors. We have scientists, artists, farmers, and philosophers just like your people, but every human grows up learning to survive in a hostile environment. We all know how to fight when we need to. Zeftal looked around at the human officers surrounding his medical table. Each one carried themselves with the confidence of a predator, but their eyes showed intelligence and compassion. They were killers who had chosen to be protectors. The galaxy is going to change, is it not? He asked quietly. Dr. Watson nodded. Captain, for 300 years the Krovan have terrorized peaceful species because no one was strong enough to stop them. That ends today. What will you do to them? We will free their slaves and shut down their operations. Then we will make sure they never threaten innocent people again. Zeftal closed his eyes and tried to imagine a galaxy where peaceful species could conduct research without fear of raiders. It seemed too good to be true, but he had seen what these Deathworlders could accomplish. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for answering our call. 6 months after the rescue of the Valari research team, Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as alien ships from 47 different species gathered for the largest diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Each vessel represented a civilization that had heard about humanity's intervention against the Krovan Syndicate. The news had spread quickly through the peaceful species networks. The Valari had shared their story of rescue by Deathworld warriors, who fought like demons but showed mercy to the innocent. Other species freed from Krovan slave camps told similar tales of human soldiers who risked their lives to save strangers. Admiral, the last delegation has arrived, reported Captain Jenny Brooks from the communication station. Representatives from the Hegemony Council are requesting permission to come aboard. Morrison nodded. The Hegemony Council represented the most powerful civilized species in this region of the galaxy. For centuries, they had maintained peace through diplomacy and economic pressure. The arrival of humanity had apparently upset their carefully balanced system. Grant them permission. Escort them to Conference Room Alpha with the other delegations. As Morrison walked through the corridors of her flagship, she passed windows showing the massive gathering of ships outside. Some vessels belonged to species grateful for human protection. Others came from civilizations worried about these new warriors who had appeared from nowhere. The conference room buzzed with dozens of different languages being translated through universal communication devices. Morrison took her place at the head of the large oval table and looked around at the assembled representatives. Captain Zeftal sat with the Valari delegation, his people having recovered well from their ordeal. Beside him sat former slaves from a dozen different species, all freed by human military operations over the past 6 months. Across the table, Ambassador Kethron of the Hegemony Council studied Morrison with obvious suspicion. His species, the Xanthari, had been the dominant peacekeeping force in the galaxy for over a millennium. The sudden appearance of human military power clearly threatened their position. Admiral Morrison, Kethron began and perfectly translated English. The Hegemony Council has serious concerns about human activities in this sector. Your species has conducted military operations in 17 different systems without consulting established galactic authorities. Morrison kept her expression neutral. Ambassador, we responded to distress calls from peaceful species under attack by raiders and slavers. Were we supposed to let them die while we filed paperwork? The proper procedure would have been to contact the Hegemony Council for mediation and diplomatic resolution. Captain Zeftal stood up from his seat. Ambassador Kethron, with respect, my people tried diplomatic solutions for 200 cycles. The Krovan response was to capture our scientists and sell them as slaves. How exactly would more diplomacy have helped? A murmur of agreement went around the table from representatives of other species who had suffered under Krovan raids. The Zenthari ambassador looked uncomfortable as victims of the slave trade spoke up about their experiences. Morrison waited for the voices to quiet before responding. Ambassador, the Hegemony Council had centuries to address the Krovan problem. During that time, how many innocent beings were enslaved or killed while you pursued diplomatic solutions? The hegemony believes in peaceful resolution of conflicts. Violence should always be the last option. Violence was the last option, Morrison replied firmly. It came after decades of raids, thousands of enslaved beings, and systematic torture of peaceful species. The Krovan chose violence. We simply ended it. Representative Lythek of the Talar Union, a species that had lost 3 colonies to Krovan raids, spoke up. Admiral Morrison, what are human intentions regarding galactic governance? Do you seek to replace the Hegemony Council with human authority? Morrison shook her head. Representative Lythek, humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy. We have our own worlds to develop and our own people to care for. What we will not tolerate is peaceful species being terrorized by predators, while the galactic community does nothing. Then what do you propose? Asked Ambassador Kethron. Simple. The galaxy continues to operate as it always has. Species pursue science, art, trade, and cultural exchange. But predatory species like the Krovan will face immediate and overwhelming response from human forces. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Morrison continued. We are not asking for tribute or territory. We are not demanding trade agreements or political influence. We are simply making it clear that the age of unchallenged aggression is over. Dr. Veltar of the Scientific Coalition raised one of her 4 hands. Admiral, how can peaceful species trust that humans will not become the new threat? Your military capabilities far exceed anything we have seen. Morrison had expected this question. Dr. Veltar, in the past 6 months, human forces have liberated 43 slave camps, freed over 10,000 prisoners, and dismantled the Krovan Syndicate's entire operation. In that same time, we have not claimed a single world, demanded any resources, or forced any species to change their government. She activated a holographic display showing human fleet positions throughout the sector. Our ships patrolled trade routes that were unsafe for generations. Species that were afraid to explore beyond their home systems are now conducting research in areas that were Krovan territory. Just months ago, Captain Zeftal stood again. If I may speak, my people have resumed their botanical research in the asteroid fields where we were captured. Human escorts ensure our safety, but they do not interfere with our scientific work. They ask for nothing in return. Similar testimonials came from representatives around the table. The Corvani spoke of trade routes reopened by human patrols. The Helix Confederacy described research stations that could now operate without fear of raids. Ambassador Kethron looked increasingly uncomfortable as species after species praised human protection. Admiral Morrison, the Hegemony Council demands that humans submit to galactic civilization standards and register your military capabilities with our oversight committee. Morrison's expression hardened. Ambassador, humans did not seek out this responsibility. We received a distress call from strangers and chose to help. If the Hegemony Council had been capable of protecting peaceful species, we would never have needed to get involved. She stood and walked to the viewport showing the gathered ships. But since we are involved, let me make our position clear. Any species that threatens peaceful civilizations will face human response. Any organization that enables predators through inaction will be ignored. Are you threatening the Hegemony Council? Morrison turned back to face the assembly. I am stating a fact. For 300 years, the Krovan terrorized this sector while the galactic community pursued endless diplomatic discussions. In 6 months, humans ended that threat permanently. She returned to her seat. The choice is simple. Work with us to protect innocent species, or continue your diplomatic discussions while we do the actual work of keeping the peace. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the fundamental shift had already occurred. The galaxy's power structure had changed the moment humans answered the Valari distress call. As the delegations departed, Captain Zeftal approached Morrison privately. "Admiral, I wanted to thank you again for what your people have done." Morrison smiled. "Captain, when we received your distress signal, humanity had a choice. We could have ignored it, or we could have remembered that someone asking for help deserves an answer." Zeftal looked out at the stars through the viewport. "The galaxy is safer now because Deathworlders chose to be protectors instead of predators. That is what civilization really means, Captain. Not the absence of strength, but the choice to use strength to protect the innocent."